Hey everybody, welcome to Far Out Dudes.
Yeah, it's another week, and we got another far-out conversation for you.
I'm one of your hosts, Paul.
I'm your co-host, Joseph, or your other co-host.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, like, your better co-host.
Yeah, that didn't flow off the tongue very well.
And what you can't
Yes,
see
it
on
did.
camera is that he's got a little bit of hot sauce right here on his cheek. Still there.
Did I get it?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay,
Now.
good.
They probably can't even see it on the camera, but anyway.
Nope.
So this week, as we talked about on our previous...
Where are we, though?
We're
traveling,
we
baby.
can't forget to tell the people that because of our supporters, we thank you guys. We have the money to fly us and all of our equipment to Egypt.
Yes. Like the other influencers like us, thank you for giving us your hard-earned money so we can travel and view the world, not you.
So you can live vicariously through us while we sit in Egypt. Again,
Yes.
this is not a green screen. This is really Egypt behind us.
We really are here.
We
Now that COVID restrictions have lifted too, we're traveling.
Yeah. So continue to send us your money so we can continue to travel.
The subject I brought today, which should have been brought to light 2 months ago?
I don't know. But it goes well with our previous podcast where we talked about our React video from last week with the giant finger.
Yes. So I brought to discuss did a little research into the Nephilim. Now, do you know who the Nephilim are?
Yes.
Okay. Well, give me the gist of what you know.
So I'm going to go back. It's kind of biblical from my perspective. They're basically fallen angels who have gotten with earthly women.
Exactly. Well, the version I'm getting at and that we'll be talking about, the Nephilim are children of the fallen angels, like you said, that mated with earthly women.
Mm-hmm.
They were evil, supernatural, and superhuman.
Were they evil, though?
Yes. And
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And we may be carrying those evil genes.
Ooh.
And they may have helped build the...
Luckily, I only carry denim
well,
genes.
you're going to be carrying some different genes.
and not evil jeans. Just the denim one
The
kind.
skin tight ones. So, and they may have helped build the pyramids. Now,
Oh, that's interesting.
let me get to that. So let me explain. Put your seatbelts on. Put your seatbelts on. Now, as we know, the Great Pyramid was built using huge granite and limestone blocks, 2.5 million of them to be exact, with some of them weighing up to 50 tons. It stands in the exact center of the world, midway between the west coast of Mexico and the east coast of China.
So, wait.
Hold on. And between the North Cape of Norway and the Cape of Good Hope of South Africa. It stands on the 30th parallel, both latitude and longitude.
Okay.
It was built with perfect angles and shafts pointed perfectly at stars and constellations. Now, with this amazing feat of engineering, you know what hadn't been invented yet?
Machinery to carry some of this stuff?
The wheel. The wheel had not been invented yet.
Wait. I could have swore I watched like a lot of these insurance commercials and all of these cavemen were like rolling the wheel.
No. The wheel was invented, or the pyramids were built 500 years before the wheel was invented.
What? Mind blowing.
Now, how the heck were they moving these 50-ton blocks?
With a lot of slaves.
Possibly, but also with the Nephilim. That's how.
I'm going to go with a lot of Hebrew slaves. If we're doing this biblically, in Egypt, there's lots of slaves, bro.
That's part of them.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. But we don't know what they did. Anyways.
Oh,
we
and-
know the Nephilim.
Okay, slaves and giants.
Yes. Giant slaves.
Giant slaves.
Yes.
That's crazy.
So we know the Nephilim are tall and, well, giants. That's because these fallen angels who have immense power and are taller, stronger, smarter than, any earthly man at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those genes that were passed on were that of the fallen angels, hence how huge they are with, those mentioned attributes.
Was that pre or post Noah?
Well, I want to go back to the time of Noah,
Okay.
specifically 436 years after the flood. Noah sent 12 spies to go scout the land they were going to fight and take back. When those men came back, they brought a cluster of grapes on a pole that took 2 men to carry. Now, how big were these freaking grapes that it took 2 men to carry these?
I just thought
This cluster of grapes.
I just thought they brought like a big bundle, like lots
whole
of
bunch
grapes.
of them?
Yeah.
Well, it was one cluster. It wasn't.
Is that what they said? One cluster?
Yes.
I don't remember exactly the terminology
a
that was
cluster
used.
of grapes.
A cluster of grapes. Okay.
Were there a lot, or were they genetically engineering to make food bigger for much bigger
It was
Nephilim?
GMO before we named it GMO.
OG GMO.
Okay.
So now you may be wondering, how tall are these Nephilim? How tall do you think they were?
I would guess since they're taller than us, I'm going to go with maybe 10, 12 feet.
AJ, you're pointing your fingers. 6 feet tall? 15 feet tall.
15 feet, okay.
So you're close.
All righty.
There's a passage that talks about Og, king of Bashan, and it says, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bed of iron. 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of man." So there you go. It was 9 by 4 cubits.
Okay, what is
For those who have no idea the dimensions of a cubit, in Hebrew.
Yes, please.
In Hebrew, a cubit is 25 1/4 inches, which means Og's bed was 18 3/4 feet long and 8 1/3 feet wide. And today's king-size beds are 6 1/2 feet long and 6 1/3 feet wide. So his bed was 3 times as long with 2 extra feet on the sides, which means you go from full size to queen and then a king. Okay. You get extra like a few inches on each side, not feet.
Yeah. Okay, so he wasn't necessarily 18 feet tall, but he was probably like maybe 16 feet because extra 2 feet. But wait, I actually, now that I remember a scripture in the Bible that says, I think it was when Moses where he sent out spies for a particular town. I forget what they were. And they came back and said they were tall as cedar trees.
Yes. That 10 out of the 12 men he sent said, we're not going to like fight them and we're not going to win this city because they're so huge.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were tall. But how tall are cedar trees?
I don't know. I didn't look up. I'm not a arborist. I don't know how cedar trees are.
Let's Google that right now then.
All right, Google it.
Let's Google how tall
you didn't have to put in Google.
Is the average
This guy went to google.com.
cedar tree? 40 to 70 inches.
Feet.
And feet. Sorry, 40 to 70 feet. And a spread
40 inches is like this. How small were those people if the Nephilim were giants?
My bad. 40 to 70 feet. That's not 18 feet.
No.
That's like,
well, at the same time,
that
how
is
big
huge.
Were those cedar trees matured and whatnot, and not cut down?
Well, I mean, the spread themselves, it says the spread, their tree widths were probably about 20 to 40 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's pretty.
Yeah. And that may be.
That's pretty tall.
This was before the flood. No, after the flood.
I believe it was after the flood.
So this still could be first generation Nephilim that had the first genes passed on, and they're still huge. So you remember the story of David and Goliath, right?
Yes.
And most people do. It's a story of, how faith and strength to overcome great odds.
Okay.
But what was Goliath?
He was a giant.
A giant, yes. And his height was 6 cubits, which makes him 13 feet, 6 inches tall.
That's a pretty tall person.
So we have 2 good references here on the Nephilim height. And the Nephilim were at minimum twice the height of the average man today.
Wait, and speaking of, did they say taller than cedar trees or as tall as cedar trees?
You brought that up,
I did bring that up. As tall. Oh, they said as tall. Okay.
So some might have been. Some may not have been.
Yeah.
So, like I said, they're twice the size of the average man today. And we know that people were shorter back then. Okay, so imagine them being like 3 times your size.
Yeah.
So the average man today, American man, is 5'9". So 13 feet, you know what I mean? So it makes sense.
Yeah, that's taller than 5'9".
Yeah, it's twice the size. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not only were they tall, but this passage I found says, And yet there was a war at Gath where was a man of great stature, whose fingers and toes were 24, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. And he also was the son of a giant. So if you couldn't tell, they were Nephilim by their giant size. The other giveaway would be their 6 fingers and toes. So maybe someone today has 6 of each and they're, a midget Nephilim.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, we can't hear you because you didn't want to be in this episode.
Yeah, nobody can hear. But you know what's interesting? Now that I think the other thing I think about is that in other cultures, they also had giants too, like the Greeks. Mm-hmm. They called them the Titans, right?
Yes.
Weren't the Titans like the giants for the Greek mythology?
Yeah, and I'll get to that too because it comes like full circle. So back to the pyramids.
Okay.
The Great Pyramids of Giza, the temples of Egypt, and the great monuments of Mexico, Peru, and Cambodia all have one thing in common. They're all aligned with the stars. So if we were to believe exactly what's been told, that the Great Pyramid was built in Khufu's reign, which spanned 23 years, and over 2 million blocks were used, that means one block would need to be moved and placed every 5 minutes to complete that work. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot of work for someone who doesn't have the wheel yet.
Especially every 5 minutes. That's pretty fast for the giant blocks that they were.
Yeah, so you got to get these not only have these giant blocks and put them in place, but make them, have them ready.
You think about how some movies and Discovery Channel and History Channel try to show how these individuals
here's how they move them.
Here's how they move them. Oh, they put these big logs underneath the stones, and people pulled and pushed, and they were basically rolling up.
Yeah,
think about how huge those stones are. That imagine you struggle to push a car up a small ramp.
Now imagine it.
But then again, with
50-ton block,
when you have multiple people, you can push that car up a ramp pretty easily, though, right?
True.
So I'm guessing,
but that car has wheels.
That's
you think putting these logs under there
on the log? Yeah.
Oh, let's get something around to transport this stuff on.
That's a difficult task, I would say. So, giants.
Yes, they're pushing or pulling these giant blocks.
Yes.
But every 5 minutes,
yeah, that's crazy.
So some of the Egypt gods, right? Like the most known ones, like Ra, Anubis, Isis, Osiris.
Oh yeah, I know them all.
I know you do.
We're buddies.
Yeah, those are the main ones too. So. And as you know, most have heads of other figures, have heads and bodies of animals.
Yep.
And this leads me back to the genetic engineering.
Okay.
Now, this is far out dudes. So we're having a far out conversation here.
So remember that.
Yes. And what I'm about to propose.
So chill your panties.
What I'm about to propose isn't black and white. It's exactly in that gray area that will make you think. So just keep an open mind, which shouldn't be too hard, considering nowadays. We know the Nephilim are children of fallen angels, right?
So we've talked about, yes.
Yes. So what else did these fallen angels do to make sure that the prophecy of the Son of God didn't come to pass? Well, they spread evil with the Nephilim, yes, but create other gods. We see creatures like centaur, sphinx, and other creatures with just human heads like this one here. There was an Egypt historian named Manethos who wrote, quote, "And they, the gods, were said to have brought forth double-winged human beings, also others with 4 wings and 2 faces, and one with body and 2 heads, man and woman, male and female, within one creature. Still other human beings had sights of goats and horns upon their heads. Others had feet of horses. Others were horses behind and men in front. There were also said to have been man-headed bulls and 4-bodied dogs, whose tails emerged like fish tails from their backs. Also horses with heads of dogs, and other monsters, such as all kinds of dragon-like beings, and a great number of wondrous creatures, variously formed and all different from one another, whose images they ranged beside the other in the temple of Belos and preserved."
Okay. Well, and it's funny that you think of that, because you think of winged creatures, you think of the angels and the Ark of the Covenant. Mm-hmm. One of the things that God tells them is to put basically 2 angels looking at each other, enclosing the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what the picture looks like. It's at least what they assume it looks like is the Ark of the Covenant with those angels doing that.
Yeah.
Now, would all these be a myth? Creatures like these are found in those different regions like Greece, Assyria, Italy, and of course Egypt. And there's another quote I found from scriptures that gives a little insight. It says, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. So when you hear someone say, I'm going to go out and get me some strange tonight, they may not always be meaning human.
Well, if you think of pre-flood, one of the judgments that God came down on them was because they were doing with the animals.
Bestiality.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you can say that on YouTube. That's why I didn't say it out loud. But here's one of the interesting things that the historian Josephus, he was a Jewish historian.
Not to be mixed with me,
with
Joseph.
You. But this is what he said. So you have an account from Bible. You have an account from an Egyptian historian, right? So here's the Jewish historian from his book, The Iniquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 3. He says, for many angels of God accompanied with women and begot sons that proved unjust and despairs of all that was good on account of the confidence they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians or the Greeks called giants or titans. See that?
Yeah.
So I think those are all kind of meshing together in a mesh in a sense that they were giants that existed back then. The Egyptians knew of these giants, gave them names. Obviously, the descendants of the fallen angels obviously had great strength. They had what we would say deformities, but also kind of those weird creature-like figures, 6 fingers, strength, six toes. But that also means that we know that they spread around the earth. So you have those in Egypt, you have the giants of the Bible, biblically, and then you have the giants of the Greek mythology, which were the Titans.
Yeah.
So that's interesting stuff.
Yeah, how it kind of connects. Now, seeing all this in things that you created, wouldn't you just want to make a flood and drown it all? Again, I'm not saying this is what happened, but it makes you think.
Well, I think it was because of how you said at the beginning, there were evil genes that were being passed down. So just think of these fallen angels coming together with women, having children, and basically that evil seed just kept passing down and doing evil deeds, right? Yeah. Which was creating fake gods, probably doing the fornication with the animals, right? And continuing to do terrible things to human beings as well, which biblically God says we were made in His creation. He created us, right? It was a, you would say, kind of a destruction of His creation by these fallen angels mating with women. That's not what was supposed to happen. He didn't have his angels or sons of God weren't supposed to come down and do those things.
No, yeah.
You know? And so I don't know if you're going to go into this, but there's also a portion from Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilee, and Book of Jasher that is not part of the Bible, but kind of has some biblical context some biblical information that gives more context to biblical scripture. So kind of going back to the point of them fornicating with animals, right? So as I said, there was the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, and the Book of Jubilee, which weren't considered consistent with the biblical text of the Torah and the New Covenant and all of those, right? Prophets and stuff like that. Yeah. So Jasher actually speaks of what kind of alluded to the flood and what kind of alluded to more of their destruction and how
their ending.
Yeah, their ending and what they did that probably angered God, right? So here's one of the scripts, one of the information. So here I'm going to read kind of Genesis that kind of links up perfectly with what Jasher is saying. So it says, in Genesis 6:12, it says, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. From all flesh had corrupted his way upon earth. Okay? Which there's a little information in that. So here's Jasher kind of giving more context to that particular scripture. And in Jasher 4:18, it says, and their judges and rulers went to the daughters of men and took their wives by force from their husbands according to their choice. And the sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth and the beasts of the fields and the fowlers of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with another, in order therewith to provoke the Lord. And God saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on the earth, all men and all animals. So that's kind of where that particular, like, it goes into the whole Egyptian thing too, where the giants with the head of the falcon, head of the fowls, the animals, and things like that. So I think that kind of, you show the biblical text, then you give context from these non-biblical texts on like more context of like, okay, why was God mad? Why did the Egyptians see these particular like beings in different forms? Because the angels, the fallen angels, basically made it with humans, but not only humans, with other species as well.
Yes. And you can see that in some of the pictures that, not pictures, but like hieroglyphs and everything in there, where you see these giant, pharaohs, and they have these animals on leashes, or they have their slaves on leashes too. And you can see that they're, twice their height. Of what they are. And it's just like, why we can understand like, hey, they put them this way to show like their power and everything, but why not do that with all of them and not just some of them? At the same time, why have these creatures with human heads or human bodies with different animal parts too, of them actually holding them, not just in hieroglyphs to like the Sphinx or anything, just to show.
And it's just interesting that if you don't see these, like you hear of giants, most people look and say, there was probably giants, but they don't know like how tall they were or anything. And we think of looking at the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Jeez, I'm going to go into the Manila folder thing again. The hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs.
Yes.
And they see these things and they go, oh, ancient aliens or something like that.
Yeah.
But they have... To me, in my perspective, okay, this is my perspective. Don't get all mad and upset, atheist or alienation guys. But from my perspective, the biblical text speaks clearly of these things and how there was all of these things, especially when you look at different books that aren't part of the Bible, like Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilee, where they give more context into like how these things came about. Then you look at those Egyptian the history of Egypt. You look at Greece. You look at like what is the one from the Greek mythology? Not the Toro. Sorry, the half bull, half man.
Oh, Minotaur.
The Minotaur. Yeah. So that's like, and that was a huge person animal thing too, right?
Yeah. They
so
were
that
just normal size.
Yeah. So that brings more contents and context, but more also of the proof that this stuff was really happening, and we were thinking mythology, but in all reality, it could be true history.
Yeah. And so what I want to bring up too is there's that conspiracy theory that, the Vatican has books from the Bible too that just weren't, that they're holding on to, that include things. So,
well, and that's that. If you get a chance, and it might be Enoch, Jubilee, and Jasher that they're speaking of, because those books have a lot of context in them, especially Enoch right there, because in the Bible it says that the last you hear of Enoch is basically like, and then he went to God, right? Something along those lines. I forget exactly what the scripture says, but basically the guy just all of a sudden just goes.
Yeah. So we know there are pyramids all around the world, and those are obviously more recent than the pyramids in Egypt. And I said at the beginning, we may still be carrying those Nephilim genes. I say this because not all the fallen angels gave up their spirit bodies to mate with women. The scriptures say, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, speaking of the days of the flood of Noah. So there were in days after, meaning they were in days after, meaning they spread with humans and kept spreading that same rhetoric of gods and sin and all that. So after each generation, the physical cues may have diminished, but we still may carry those genes of evil from the fallen angels.
Yeah. I mean, and from the fallen angels that they were doing a lot of evil things.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And that's where it came into play too. Like they weren't just like normal and some were bad and some were fine. Like they were just, they were evil.
Yeah. And so here's another one, but not from Jasher this time, but from Jubilee. Jubilee 7:24. It says, and after this they sinned against the beast and the birds and all that moveth and walketh on the earth. And much blood was shed on the earth, and every imagination and desire of men imagined vanity and evil continuously. So like all of those things just continued to happen. Like and just terrible things.
One thing I want to clear up too, a lot of people kind of get mistaken, is angel doesn't mean, when you think of angel, people think of like good, feather, like winged person, entity. But angel just means like messenger, so angels can be good or bad.
Yeah.
We've just over time categorized them differently as like angels and demons. So it's,
So let us know in the comments below if this is something that you are interested in hearing more of.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's especially Egypt. Like there's so much to dig into. But I want to finish up with this quote. Some may know it, some may not. But the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world he does not exist.
I believe that is true.
So thank you for listening and watching.
Like, share, subscribe with your friends, hit the notification bell. It helps with the algorithm. Commenting down below also, whether you like the video or not. Anything that you do helps with the algorithm so we can pop up, okay? And we want to thank our followers and the ones who have contributed to our wonderful trip to Egypt.